Welcome back to IndyFest, everybody, here in studio and watching at home. I'm John Ralston, the CEO of the Nevada Independent. Now, you can't tell anybody this. This is all off the record, what I'm about to say. But this is my favorite part of IndyFest. Every year, having these 4 high school students who are going to put on a debate for a half an hour, and then maybe at the end we'll ask for clapping to see which side is that good with you guys? All right. So I'm gonna do something I don't like to do, which is get out of the way, and I'm gonna let them handle this. They know what to do. Just as you start, as I told you guys before, just introduce yourselves before you start your first part of the debate so they know who you are. Good luck to everybody. Get going.
Awesome. Well, I'm Nola Zeppenfeld, and I will be giving the first speech. It is 4 minutes.
Content warning. Content warning. Content warning.
Oh, okay. Just before I start, though, I would like to say that our constructive does include human trafficking. If that is difficult for anybody, please feel free to leave at any time. So with that, I will begin in 3, 2, 1. We affirm the resolution resolved. The state of Nevada ought to guarantee the right to housing. We will provide the following definition, ought, which is used to express obligation, advisability, natural expectation, or logical consequence, according to Merriam-Webster. Right now, Nevada's housing prices are massively increasing, leading to a progressively worsening homelessness issue. This is confirmed by a report coming from the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development in 2022, with 7,618 people total being homeless in Nevada. 3,567 of which are unsheltered, and 2,752 people being chronically homeless. This is a 10.4% jump since 2020. Homeless people are the most vulnerable people. The debate should be evaluated on who can help the most vulnerable in our society. 1, human trafficking. The World Population Review in August 2023 states that Nevada has the second highest human trafficking rate in the United States, with a rate of 6.33 out of 100,000. Channel 13, Las Vegas News, KNTV adds to this by stating Nevada is especially vulnerable to higher rates of human trafficking because they are incredibly high rate of unsheltered use, plus Las Vegas is an international travel hub, which is further cemented by the research by the National Sexual Violence Resource Center, which states that 1 in 3 teens are lured into prostitution within 48 hours of living on the street. All issues caused by homelessness can be solved by the right to housing. Furthermore, Government 1 2020 details a report stating that 78.3% of homeless women in the study had been subjugated to rape, physical assault, and/or stalking. Of victimized respondents, 55.9% had been raped, 72.2% had been physically assaulted, and 25.4% had been subjugated to stalking. With finally, the nonprofit organization Brighten the Corner linking everything together by stating that, unfortunately, homelessness and human trafficking are often directly linked, as individuals experiencing homelessness are often more vulnerable to being trafficked due to their economic circumstances, physical surroundings, high prevalence of addiction, and mental health issues, and a lack of social support networks. Nevada could provide those support networks. Guaranteeing a right to housing could be the first step in combating trafficking. Decreasing human trafficking would increase the quality of life of those most vulnerable, demonstrating the affirmation's ability to solve for suffering and help those who are most hurt. Our second point is economic feasibility. According to the Help Home Hope organization, one focused on reducing homelessness in Nevada, they write in 2015 that long-term cost of managing homelessness on the streets is 3 times greater than the cost of permanent supportive housing in Nevada. Homelessness is a serious and expensive issue in our community and across the country, but we find that in our own Clark County, homelessness is costly for all of us Nevada taxpayers, spending about $73,000 for 1 year of services for 1 homeless individual. But by contrast, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development estimates that it costs about $21,000 per year to house a homeless individual. According to CBS News, nearly half of all hourly American workers, 48%, don't have savings after rent and other expenses. Scaling back taxes could be just the break Americans need. Economic prosperity and decreased suffering of the homeless both contribute to helping those in need, demonstrating the affirmation of moral and feasible priority. By guaranteeing the right to housing, the affirmation will prevent people from slipping through the cracks and help in the fight against human trafficking, while saving money for our own taxpayers and helping those who are most vulnerable. Meaning in today's debate, you must vote for affirmative to help our local Nevadans. I got 329. I'm open to cross.
I know
sorry.
Hello. My name is Jonathan Rufino, and I am on the negative side. According to the Las Vegas Review Journal, in 2023, homelessness in Las Vegas rose 14% in comparison to the 2022 statistic of 5,645. It's not just Vegas either. In the state of Nevada as a whole, there was a 14% increase in homelessness in the same period as well. There are many factors causing the staggering rise in homelessness. The aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, jobs becoming seemingly more and more difficult to obtain, and gambling addicts spending all of their money for just a fun night in the casino. No matter the reason, the rise in homelessness is likely to continue to rise exponentially, which raises the question of how do we solve the increasing homelessness problem in Nevada? Many believe that the Nevada ought to guarantee the right to housing to Nevada citizens. However, the proposition of being guaranteed housing in Nevada is incredibly unrealistic for several reasons. Those reasons being lack of proper funding for proper housing, impact on the school funding, and the government's general incompetence. Lack of funding for building or renovating these houses is a significant problem. The money has to come from somewhere, and it's not likely coming from the government. Building a single house in Nevada ranges anywhere from $200,000 to $400,000. Expecting the funds of building thousands of these homes is impractical at best. According to LevelSet, building an apartment complex is roughly $400 per square foot, or $37 million for 100 rooms. If we were to account all 16,000 homelessness in Nevada, after calculating the cost per room, it would cost over $5,920 million to pay for housing for every homeless person in Nevada. Where will these funds come from? It certainly won't be coming from the state. They can barely afford to fix the streets or provide good enough funding to the school districts. Where will the money come from? How will the state be able to provide upkeep for these houses in the long run, especially if they must constantly continue building these houses over the course of years? Speaking of school districts, oftentimes when discussing the topic of building new homes for the homeless, people ignore the impact this may have on schooling. According to gincenter.org, a large percentage of K-12 funding is property tax, and so the funding of a school is closely correlated with the property tax in a given area. The government is likely to build these homes in cheaper areas, such as the poor, and so it will cause more issues within these areas rather than others. Additionally, under Chapter 361 of the Nevada Legislature, NRS 361.060, the government-owned housing is exempt from property taxes, pulling away from school and other public funds and giving none back in return, causing conflict between school funds and new shelter or home funds. This raises an issue. We either increase the amount of homes for the homeless and decrease the amount of salary for teachers, causing possibly more homeless in the future, or we bring more money up for the schooling and lower the amount of money towards the homeless. Our final contention is that the government's general incompetence when it comes to fixing societal issues will cause more problems than it will solve. If we look back at how the government has handled similar issues in the past, such as Section 8 housing, we can see that the government is willing to solve issues like this, but only in the cheapest and least effective way possible, leading to new ghettos and essentially creating modern-day segregation, separating the rich in places such as Henderson and poor in areas such as northeastern Las Vegas. Of course, these problems would be spread in the entirety of Nevada. However, Las Vegas is one of the most highly concentrated areas in the state. Today, we spoke of why proposing the right to guarantee housing may not be as positive as many may believe. We cited lack of proper funding for housing, impact on school funding, and the government's general incompetence as our main contentions as to why this bill may propose problems if passed. We vote to not allow for housing in Nevada. Thank you.
How does this create more issues?
You ready for cross? Okay. Awesome. So how will the school funding be redistributed create more issues?
The school funding being, could you repeat the question? I apologize.
Yeah, 100%. So by funding how will funding from schools be impacted by the property trade?
The amount of housing in a given area allows for schools to gain property tax gain profit from the property tax, allowing for a rise in money. And so if a school is in an area where a new homeless shelter is being built, there would be no property tax on that homeless shelter, and more children will be living in those homeless shelters, causing more students to go to the schooling, causing more funding to be spent on them, with none in return from the homeless shelter.
Okay, awesome. Do you have a definition of ought?
I do not.
You do not, so does that mean you agree with ought being used to express an obligation?
Yes, I agree.
So wouldn't you agree that it's an obligation less than necessarily being feasibly able to?
It is an obligation. However, an obligation can only be met if they're able to. So, apologies.
And you stated a card about how many homeless people there were in Nevada. Could you restate it?
How many homeless people are in Nevada? 16,000
Okay.
plus. Apologies. That was a rough estimate from 2023.
And then you talk about in your first point about the funding being there's not enough funding for it. Where are you getting your information about the single homes being 200,000 to 400,000?
I am getting that from levelset.com.
Okay. That concludes cross. Thank you.
Okay. I'm just gonna take like 20 seconds of preparation time. I'll start now. Okay. Oh, we just had.
We just had cross.
It's fine. Okay. So, yeah, this is the 4-minute rebuttal on the affirmative side. I'll begin time now. The negation right now only adds fuel to the fire. Right now, Nevada housing has a housing crisis. They give you statistics, so do we. We tell you that there's been a 10.4% increase in homelessness since 2020. We would argue that negation does absolutely nothing, while the affirmative calls the fire department and puts out the fire. Let's go on to the line by line. First of all, they tell you that jobs are becoming more and more difficult to get them. Here's the fundamental fact. A lot of times for housing opportunities, you need to actually have a house or some form of home in order to actually apply for these jobs. Second off, we would argue that homeless people are usually in the terms of survival mode. They're trying to get a house before they go and get a job, and also they're trying to build their economic threshold. But either way, they tell you that how can we solve it, because guaranteeing is unrealistic. The first thing they try to give you is, first of all, that it costs too much. First of all, their evidence comes from Levelset. Our evidence comes from Clark County. We tell you should prefer it for 2 reasons. First of all, it comes directly from a Nevada source, and second off, we would argue it comes from a county who actually takes into account funds. We tell you that right now we're spending $73,000 annually per homeless person. Guess how much we could save if we actually house them? We can save up to we can bring down that cost up to $21,000. We would argue that is 10 times better than what they're trying to achieve. But either way, they tell you that's the second reason it's unrealistic for schooling. First of all, it makes absolutely no sense. First of all, think about the children who actually go to these schools. If they are homeless, how can they focus on their education? If not, you're actually bettering schooling. If you actually fundamentally help these people get to their jobs, they get to the schooling that they actually need to get. Either way, they tell you, continue to give more and more statistics talking about more and more funding and how we don't have it. But we literally just told you from a study from 2015 telling you that we would save 3 times the amount of money if we actually affirm the resolution and guarantee the right to housing. The next problem with their arguments is that they try to argue that schools wouldn't get any funding in terms of like returns from homeless shelters. Couple problems here. First of all, we would argue that, sure, that's a problem, but we would argue that the benefits outweigh that problem. For one key reason. These people are homeless and they're more subject to human trafficking. Las Vegas has a high homeless youth population that are usually more targeted to violent crimes such as prostitution or sexual violence. We would argue that that's absolutely terrible, and even if we have to pay a cost, we ought to pay that cost for our children and for the women and for every single homeless person in Nevada. Either way, go on to the next argument talking about how we're going to create more issues and how schools aren't going to get the funding. A couple problems here. It's not necessarily that we don't have the funding, we do. The superintendent, Jara, gave tons of money, and still, schools haven't seen any of that. We would argue that it's a mismanagement of funds, not the fact that we don't have enough funding. That's the problem. Either way, let's go on to this argument about government handling. Couple problems here as well. First of all, they try to argue that that we don't have the political capital or we don't have the will to do it. That's fundamentally false. First of all, right now in the status quo, we're building more and more affordable housing all throughout Las Vegas as well as Nevada. That's a fact. But either way, we would tell you that when we guarantee the right to housing, when we create this form of process, when we allow people to not slip through the cracks, we're allowing for better and better motives. We would argue that this is something that we can obviously help the community with. It makes logical sense. We literally give you pieces of evidence saying that we save around $50,000 per homeless person. Why? Because we save on money such as emergency room visits and other programs that help homeless people. We would argue that inherently that's much better than anything they try to achieve. Let's go back onto our side of the arguments. First of all, they don't give a definition to oughts. Second off, we would argue that we want to help the most vulnerable people in our society. We give you a lens to view this debate on. You should view on who is the most vulnerable in our population. Those are homeless people, specifically children and women who are subjugated to so much victimization in terms of sexual violence and other forms. We would argue that the affirmative world solves this, the negative world does nothing. For these reasons and many more, we are proud to affirm.
All right, so I am Matthew. I am speaking for the negative rebuttal. And so, first off, one of the key flaws in the affirmations argument is their point on human trafficking. Now, obviously, human trafficking is a big issue, especially here in Nevada. But the proposal of free public housing will do absolutely nothing to help this problem. California, which, as we said before in our argument, already provided free Section 8 housing to their citizens, California has by far the highest rate of human trafficking in the country. So clearly, those two things did not correlate and did not work together at all. The second main problem with the affirmatives' point on the economy is that they simply do not understand how crime works and how poverty works. Crime does not arise just from poverty. It is poverty in the face of extreme economic inequality that causes it. So, for example, you could have a dirt poor town in the middle of white America that has little to no crime compared to a poor city such as Compton or Watts or any neighborhood in South Central Los Angeles that has a high crime rate. The reason those cities have those high crime rates is because they are stacked in the middle of an economic disparity and a racial disparity as well. Los Angeles is home to numerous places such as Rodeo Drive and Hollywood, where billionaires and millionaires come and spend their money freely. Meanwhile, there are people in Compton dying on the streets every week from gang violence, and their communities are left to rot there. Who's to say that the same situation won't happen here in Las Vegas? Las Vegas continues to pump millions of dollars into fun attractions for tourists. All rich tourists from around the world come here as the entertainment capital of the world. How can we seriously entertain the notion that free public housing will help these people if we are simply, as we said, shoving them off into areas such as northeastern Las Vegas, which has a very high black population, very high Hispanic population, and keeping them away from the actual economic prosperous neighborhoods such as Henderson, Summerlin, which are, again, predominantly white. And that ends my rebuttal.
Okay. I am ready for crossfire whenever you are. Okay. I'm going to take the first question.
I'm ready.
Okay, so let's go on to this argument talking about how high crime is happening because of economic disparity. All right, so wouldn't the affirmative solve this because we prevent people from being homeless and being subjugated to, for example, human trafficking?
Guaranteeing a right to housing would certainly help some people get back on their feet, but it does nowhere does it say that we will give these people, better access to economic knowledge, give them better access to jobs, give them better access to education for them to achieve whatever the goal there is.
Can I quickly respond to that real quick?
Huh?
Can I quickly respond to that?
Yeah.
So, okay, you say that like they can't get like, for example, education or like other forms like that to actually get them on their feet. But wouldn't you say having a house is basically the foundation to like, for example, education or a job? Wouldn't this actually help them like actually get back on their feet? Having some form of housing is better than having no form of housing. Would you not agree?
Certainly having a stable home would help these people, but as we see in many impoverished neighborhoods, they may have homes, but those homes are run down. People want to escape from those homes. There's a reason so many famous people from Compton achieved their economic prosperity outside of the city. People like famous rappers like Dr. Dre,
Okay.
Kendrick Lamar, they achieved all of their economic prosperity from leaving Compton. How are we to assume
So
that the same thing wouldn't happen to Las Vegas?
So, okay, you can have a question.
No.
Okay, I'll take another question then. So you say like famous rappers like Dr. Dre and all these people left Compton so that way they can have better economic opportunities, right? Is that available to the average homeless Nevadan?
No.
So what do you argue that the right to guaranteeing housing would help people get back on their feet and allow them to not be subjugated to crime?
Certainly, again, having a stable home. Actually, with the way public housing has gone in the past, even a stable home isn't guaranteed, because one thing that ensures stability is economic stability. I highly doubt that these public houses will be treated at all fairly and given the proper funding that they need.
We would argue that you shouldn't make the perfect be the enemy of the good, but that's cross.
I'll take 40 seconds.
Okay, we'll start now. They didn't respond to much. Okay, so.
If you guys don't mind, we would like to take some prep time.
Yeah, we're taking prep.
Yeah, we're taking prep time, so you can.
Are y'all ready?
Then I'll be doing the 2-minute summary, beginning in 3, 2, 1. So starting on our own case, again, there's still no definition of ought, which means that you need to look at the affirmatives case and look at it through the idea of people ought to have housing. We're not saying that it's necessarily entirely feasible, but we're saying that people on a moral basis deserve a right to housing because they're humans, and we don't want them to suffer any longer. And on the app, we're also saying that whoever wins this debate is who can establish they are helping the most vulnerable people, which the AF is the only one doing that in this situation. The negation shows no way in which they are helping people. The affirmative, by guaranteeing the right to housing, is making sure that every single individual would have a right to housing. So first, let's start on our human trafficking point. They really give no response to this other than that in California this didn't work, even though they give no clear statistics on that being so. We are saying that we have the second highest rate in the entire nation on human trafficking. And if we give people homes, they wouldn't have to flee their homes and then in 48 hours get brought into human trafficking. It takes 48 hours for a child on the streets to get pulled into human trafficking. If we could get them off the streets and into a house in less than that amount of time, we would stop the rate of human trafficking, which is something the negation does not address and does not refute, meaning that you have to look at it. We also talk about economic feasibility. They are saying that, well, it is too expensive. And we're saying, well, no, it's not. And what we're looking at here is we are helping more people, and we're saying that we can't afford it. They're saying you can't build $200,000 houses. That's not necessarily what we're saying. We're getting a roof over someone's head. Maybe it's not your giant mansion or anything like that, but it's going to be something rather than just being on the streets. So let's move on to their case. They talk about, first, talking about funding. We've already gone over that. You should go with the affirmation. We are funding something. We're saying there is a possibility to fund something. We are bringing people houses. The negation's not doing anything. Second, they're talking about school districts. They're trying to make the argument that the funding for school districts is going to go down if we do this. But wouldn't children having homes be better than their education going down? The fundamental first right of equality of life is someone having a house. You have to have a house to be able to go through with other things. So housing comes first before education or before the economy. And thirdly, they go on about governmental problems. What we're talking about is an ought. We're talking about, yes, we're even saying it's feasible, but even if you just look at the ought argument, we're saying we ought to. So governmental being able to do this should be scrapped from the round. So overall, you should vote for the affirmation because we are helping people. The negation's not doing anything. They're saying, oh, we can't do it, we can't do it. But we're saying we can do it, and we're saying we're going to help people. So you have to vote for us.
Today, we spoke that Nevada ought not to provide the right to housing. We spoke of the lack of funding for these houses, the impact on schooling, and the general incompetence of the government. The opponent says to focus on helping the most vulnerable, and all of the attempts they're proposing would not and have not worked before in the past. It is simply not realistic to allow for housing for these homeless people because it would cause more issues in the entirety of Nevada as a whole with funding and all of these other kinds of issues that would be caused by them. This debate is not a debate of morals. It is a debate of logistics. Yes, it may be immoral for people to be on the streets or to be put into human trafficking. However, giving housing hardly helps these people in the long run in any way, shape, or form. It may give them a temporary source of sanctuary while they may need help. However, there's no guarantee that it will help them in the long run. And giving free housing to people will not only cause the people around them to go down or to fall as a result, but it also has not worked before in the past, like in California or in other states across the country. That is all we have.
Okay. I'm gonna take like a couple. Yeah, I'll just take a little bit of prep. Okay, I'll begin the final speech. Now, like we told you, a system may not be perfect, but do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Yes, you could argue that there may be some problems in affirming, but we would argue that overall the benefits outweigh the harms every single time. They never once respond to our statistic talking about how we save almost $50,000 per homeless individual in terms of taxes when we ought to guarantee the right to housing. Not only that, but they never respond to our ought argument. They don't have a definition of their own, so therefore it's not only a feasible argument, but it's also a moral argument. And we would argue that they just concede in their last speech that this is also not that we win the moral debate, that we supposedly don't win the feasibility debate, but let's go on to the feasibility debate. Like we just told you right now, we just gave you the Clark County evidence, and not only that, but we would argue that what we've seen every single time, and the statistic that they refuse to ignore, they refuse to accept, is the evidence telling you that we save 3 times more money when we guarantee the right to housing. Fundamentally, they never once ever respond to this. Either way, go on to the next issue, talking about human trafficking. This is the most pervasive issue probably in Nevada. Since it's a dark figure of crime and we don't know how to track it, we argue that we help women and children, as we gave you a statistic telling you that right now, 78% of homeless women in a study have been subjected to rape, physical assault, or stalking. This is not acceptable, and we should not accept this as Nevadans. And second off, we would argue that inherently, 1 in 3 teens are learning to prostitution within 48 hours of being on the streets. We would argue that when you guarantee the right to housing, when you allow a roof to be over their head, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not the best, we would argue that it's better than them being on the streets and being forced and subjugated to this violence. But either way, let's go on to their side of the argument. They make this education argument. Like we told you several times. First of all, in order to have a good education for a child, they need to have a home. Fundamentally, we would tell you that housing is a prerequisite to having good education. Either way, we would argue next on the feasibility level in terms of government, we would argue that the government ought to do it, and first of all, the government has the capability to do it. We provide you evidence that telling you it's economically feasible, and going on to this last argument, talking about how overall we do not have the means. We provided that evidence to you so many times. Like we told you, do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. Thank you.
As the negation has stated before, in opposition to the affirmation's over-reliance on highly moral factors instead of what is, again, logical, public housing or having a roof over your head certainly will help you in many occasions, but it does not guarantee you a stable future. Most people in very poor neighborhoods have roofs over their heads, but they still experience the same issues that the affirmation keeps on repeating over and over again. Human trafficking still happens. Economic disparity still happens. All of these issues are still pervasive, even when there is public housing. And so because of that, and with the economics, they still refuse to engage with the fact that when they still refuse to address the fact that in Las Vegas specifically, if we do build these public homes, they are going to be built in the poorest parts of town, and they will not be awarded these same resources to help them succeed in the future, as opposed to a neighborhood like, again, Henderson or Summerlin, where people actually are prosperous. And that ends our Grand Crossfire. Yeah.
Good debate, y'all.
Good debate.
That was great, wasn't it? I mean, I appreciate your clapping, but now you're going to have to decide, and I'm going to have to adjudicate who actually won. Okay. First, what did you think of these? Did they win? Oh my God! Oh my God! And these folks, wow, it's pretty clear cut. I know how hard this is to do in front of an audience, and you all did great. We appreciate it, and I just want to let you know, I don't think any of you know about this, but we are going, at the end, are going to give each one of these impressive students $500, which we hope you'll put away for later in your life. So thanks again for coming. We really appreciate it, and we look forward to your future. Stay in touch.
Thank you.